WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Julia Henley of Blue River is a Democratic candidate in the 41st Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Julia Henley, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
And thank you for participating in this interview. What is your campaign's key message and why are you running for this office?
Oh gosh, the key message is we need to focus on resiliency, and I believe we can do better than what we have been doing for the last 15 years.
If elected, what would be a bill you would want to introduce and why?
I really think we need to address what's going on in education. We're forgetting the Wisconsin idea, which means for education at the university level, that is a wealth of intelligence that helps us solve problems. And the schools have been decimated from pre-K through the university system, skills, training, two-year colleges. It shouldn't be this way. We're going to have 25% of our existing school systems are going to referendum in November. Why do we have to constantly ask for more money for operational? That's a huge question and it needs to be addressed.
Wisconsin projected to have a budget surplus over $3 billion in this upcoming budget year. What would be your top two priorities for the budget surplus and why?
It has to do with education. We need to stop the bleeding and the starving of our educational system, and also infrastructure, which relates to our environment. And I'm sorry, it's got to be three top priorities. Our environment is always number one. We have to have our good environment.
In your answer, you didn't mention tax cuts, tax reform. Is that part of your platform in any way?
That would come about with readjusting how we deal with our schools. Our property taxes would go down if we were not funding two separate school systems and if we were doing it appropriately. And that investment in education brings in economic prosperity. So yes, having taxes go down, absolutely, it's a wonderful thing. But it's how the money is being spent and where the priorities are that needs to change.
You've mentioned education is clearly a priority for you.
Yes.
K-12 education, also a leading issue for many voters. What specifically would you want to change? You mentioned funding. Are there other things that need to change in K-12 education?
We need to kind of address the cultural malaise that's out there. We used to have the best schools around. You'd put out a posting for an educator to come and work for you in your school district, and you'd get 100 applicants. Maybe now you'll get 4, if that. We need to motivate the next generation to become those wonderful, exciting, motivating teachers for our young kids. That is the way to equalize everybody, to give everybody an opportunity to have the best shot they can possibly have. If we are starving our educational system, we are basically starving the next few generations to thrive, and that affects the economics, our taxes, everything within the state.
What does the future look like for Wisconsin's higher education system? You also mentioned that as a priority for you. There's been some discussion around 4- and 2-year colleges, also technical colleges. What should they look like? What changes would you propose, and what does the legislature need to do to focus on in that system?
I think once again, because we've been starving the funding to our higher education, that has had a negative trickle-down effect to our 2-year colleges. We've already closed one in Richland Center. There's 6 of them being slated to close. That affects the teachers, the employment, the students, and that's not the direction to go. That is not the direction to go. So yes, does everything need to evolve and change for the changing times? Yes, of course. We need to focus on technical skills. We need to focus on certificates so people can quickly get good paying jobs. That 4-year institution, yeah, there needs to be some adjustment, but it doesn't mean closures, and it doesn't mean, like I said, starving, so we don't have those fantastic educators to help make our quality of life within Wisconsin be what it can be.
Moving on to workforce, what do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and what would you do to address it?
Again, it comes down to education, skills training, apprenticeships. All those things are just so incredibly important. And it's also culturally motivating students out there that an education is worth it. Right now, the message is, it's not worth it, you're never going to get ahead, this is, it's a terrible system. Well, then let's make it a good system where you can get ahead and you can do well.
Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. These investments also provide an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I think it's very important that we support local workers, good paying jobs, all that kind of stuff. There's nuances to this, and it can be a little bit tricky. My own experience in construction is the priority should be for the local guy that you know that can do a great job, of course. But we also, as stewards of the money, we need to be really cautious about where these contracts are going to. So it takes some analysis to do that.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as an independent contractor or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this, and what do you think should be done about it?
I am aware of this. I know it goes on. I think it is probably a common practice initially when you're hiring somebody, but it should not be an ongoing way for that person to earn an income. And that should be, they need to transition into the system to give them all the protections that they need as soon as possible. But initially, yeah, I can see a lot of contractors do that just to test somebody out before they actually hire them.
Affordable rental housing is also an issue in Wisconsin. Some have proposed government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. So what is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Would it be rent control or building more rental?
I think too often we look at things as it's an either-or situation. This is a both situation. We need to reduce the cost of rent. We also need to increase the housing stock throughout the state, whether it's urban, very much needed, or also in rural areas. We really need that to attract and retain people into our area.
Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system, as I'm sure you're aware, in western Wisconsin. Yes. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future hospital closures?
Well, the number one thing that we need to do is, like 42 other states in the union, is we need to get our Medicaid dollars. We pay into that system through our federal dollars. That money is offered back to us. We're letting billions go by. And meanwhile, our hospitals are paying way too much of the share when they're dealing with people that are sick and need care, or people are not getting the care they need. And this is particularly a problem in our rural areas. But Medicaid expansion, it's, to me, a no-brainer, and it's very, very short-sighted that our legislature has impacted this so negatively and left all that money on the table. That is our money.
Mental health care, also a growing concern, concern for state and county budgets as well. In your district, what are you hearing on this issue, and how would you address mental health care?
It is a critical thing that we as a nation, as a state, and in our communities address mental health care. And mental health care there's so much trauma out there. We're still recovering from what happened with COVID. Gun violence, it's scary for a lot of people and they're traumatized. That leads to addiction problems. And all those things lead to workers that are no longer working, contributing, and having wonderful lives. So yes, it is a priority. And that goes back to our hospitals, and that goes back to that Medicaid money. So it's all connected, it's all economics, and it's all being smart with how we use our money.
How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion? What is your position on whether there should be different limits or exceptions?
My position is that women need to be in control of their own bodies and their own lives, and they need to make decisions regarding that with their own support systems, with their families, their doctors. It's not our business. The other point about this that is really, really important to understand, it is a myth that there are women out there that are trying to have abortions when there's a viable child. That sometimes there's a non-viable pregnancy or the mother is at risk. And this is the late-term abortions. Those are the late-term abortions. So to go out there and say that women are willy-nilly killing babies is not true, and that is not what Democrats want. But the nuances of health care are so nuanced that we as legislators and judges and politicians should not be telling a woman what to do with their body.
Transitioning to transportation, what are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is that these needs are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule with reconstruction of our aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
I think it's really important to understand, particularly in my district, how important our roads are and our bridges are, especially in the face of climate crisis and increased disaster. So it's a disaster preparedness situation, and it's also transporting heavy product from the farm to the market, and it's also huge recreation. So I think we need to address those roads and that transportation within our district. It's very important for our economy, and our economy is huge in all those areas.
You mentioned the environment as one of your priorities.
Yes.
PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
I see this as a very important issue, and I have been personally affected by this. I think that our water quality is a right for all of us. And I think that for too long, and in too many situations, we have abused our natural resources. And so what we need to do about it, we need testing, we need to know where the problems are, we need mitigation to deal with that, and we need to help people through it, because very often there are health consequences with heavy poisoning. And whether it's PFAS, which is a huge one, and we know about it, it's a forever chemical, it's everywhere. And it comes down to the products we use. So culturally, we need to know more about that, so there's some information we need to know about it. There's helping the people that have been impacted by that, whether it's their infrastructure or filtering that they need. And it's also holding those that have been those major polluters accountable. We shouldn't be socializing their bad behavior, and we have to pay for it.
How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I think the leading differences are that I see government, wise government, as a solution, and as the role of government is to protect and to enhance and to create situations where people can thrive. And I think that my opponent is part of the Republican Party that addresses the decisions that need to be made in terms of privatizing everything. And I just don't think that we end up with problems in that way. We need to have some supervision for private enterprise. We need to have some rules and regulations. And none of us should be suffering from failing school systems and poor water quality, because we're not addressing that. And I think that is the big difference. It's more of a people-centric thought process and vision that I share with the Democratic Party. And I don't think my opponent, as part of the Republican Party, has the ability to act in the best interest of everyone involved.
Final question for you today. If you could wave a magic wand over the state capitol and have just one issue resolved in a way that brings people together, what would that be?
I think what I would love to see happening is more transparency so people can understand these complex issues and make them less complex. I think there is too much misinformation and too much of the shell game of look over here. And I just think that we all need to recognize that on most issues we care about the same things and we want the same things to occur. We want to have strong families. We want to have happy children and smart kids. And we want our environment to be in great shape. And we want to have the opportunity to do well and to feel well. So I'd like to get that message out there that there's a lot of positivity that could occur if we just take action together and not silo all the time. So my magic wand is we'd all be kind of listening to the same facts clearly, ethically.
Well, thank you, Julia Henley of Blue River, the Democratic candidate in the 41st Assembly District. The election is November 8th. Julia Henley, welcome, and thank you for talking with Wisconsin.
November 5th.
Oh, November 5th. Good reminder. Thank you. Our
November
air. November 5th. Thank you,
Yes,
Julia.
thank you very much.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.